Welcome. Today we're going to talk a little bit about some of the evidence that we have to support the authenticity of the Bible. And we're going to do it with refutations to Dr. Kipp Davis, who is an expert in the Dead Sea Scrolls. However, he is talking about the Old Testament in this video. To get past the theological implications of fulfilled prophecies in the Bible, university professors originating in Germany in the 1700s and 1800s, such as Doom, Doderlein, and Wellhausen, proposed hypotheses, such as a documentary hypothesis and the Deutero-Isaiah prophecy. The documentary hypothesis suggested that 4 authors wrote the first 5 books of the Bible over a long period of time, and in places where prophecies are evident, those events were recorded during or after the fulfillment. For example, Leviticus and Deuteronomy have passages that refer to the Jewish exiles that would take place in the 6th and 8th centuries BC. Leviticus and Deuteronomy traditionally have been attributed to Moses hundreds of years prior. Rather than retain the historical attribution, modern revisionists suggest other authors inserted those passages. In the 8th century BC, Isaiah prophesied that the kingdom under which he lived, the Assyrian kingdom, would fall to Babylon, and Babylon would fall to King Cyrus of Persia. Of course, this all happened. Isaiah had been informed by God. The latter, the fall to King Cyrus, occurred in 539 BC, as you can see, well over 100 years after Isaiah made this prediction, and specifically named King Cyrus. So revisionists, of course, redate that portion. And they do it rather without any sort of guilt. In fact, they admit quite clearly that that's exactly why they're dating as they do, as we see right here with Kipp Davis. Let's listen.
There's certainly clues within several of the pieces of writing that they are quite late. Lots of scholars will tend to date the P source, which contains like the Genesis 1 creation story that has quite a few literary and thematic parallels with the Enuma Elish. So they tend to date something like that to an exilic or a post-exilic period. And then there's also sections within Leviticus or within Deuteronomy which speak openly about a captivity.
So in here, Deuteronomy 28, thou shalt beget sons and daughters, but they shall not be thine, for they shall go into captivity. Leviticus 26:33, I'll scatter you among the nations and draw a sword after you, so that your land becomes desolate and your towns become ruins. Then the land will finally be pleased with its Sabbaths, as long as it lies desolate, while you are in the land of your enemies. At that time, the land will rest and take its Sabbaths. As long as it lies desolate, it will rest, that it will not have had during your Sabbaths when you were living in it. Of course, we know that the northern kingdom of Israel with the 10 tribes went into captivity under Assyria in the 8th century. Now, if Deuteronomy and Leviticus were written by Moses, that occurred hundreds of years prior. During the 6th century BC, the southern kingdom of Judah with the 2 tribes went into captivity under Babylon. This was portended many years before. The Israelites knew they needed to follow the rules, and they didn't, and so they ended up going into exile. Of course, that does not mean it was dated during the exile, but that is what these scholars are proposing.
As a result of their failure to meet the standards of the covenant in the book of Deuteronomy. The book of Leviticus is quite interesting because the exile there is presented as an atonement for the sin of the land, kind of like a sabbatical, a following of the land. So there's elements within the text that show, lots of this stuff is very late. Lots of this stuff comes from the exilic period. The book of Deuteronomy is something that is comfortably dated by, I think, most scholars to at least the reign of Josiah, if not, to core material being present in the reign of Hezekiah and then dramatically updated either directly prior to or at some time during.
These reigns are, of course, taking place under the Assyrian rule. So during the exiles. So that's why people are dating it there. It's so obvious what they're doing. And it's rather creepy if you ask me. But thankfully, when I talked to Dr. Falk just yesterday, Dr. Falk is an Egyptologist who has a Ph.D. from the University of Liverpool. Dr. David Falk had some pretty good things to share with respect to the authenticity of the 5 books of Moses. And so let's take a listen in. So that's and that kind of just brings me to another thing. I'm looking at in the books of Moses, the 5 books, the Pentateuch, or they call it the Torah, or that kind of thing. We would expect that if Moses authored this, that if he authored it, we should find evidence, I would think, of some sort of Egyptian, not only context that you've described quite well, but also in the language. And I know you've said this before, but I just wanted to, so your viewers can hear this again. And you didn't say it in this video, but a different video, is if just talking about, if you look at the wording in there, do we find evidence of Egyptian loan words or anything like
absolutely. That? Yeah, we find a great study was done by Benjamin Noonan on non-Semitic loan words found in the Old Testament. And he compares all the books of the Old Testament and says, okay, because you can't do this with Semitic words, because Semitic words are just so similar that you can't tell exactly which language they came from. But non-Semitic words, very, very easy to sort of figure out. Okay, it comes from this language, it comes from that language. And we find that, say, in the Pentateuch, it is rich with Egyptian loanwords. But we don't find any, say, Old Persian loanwords, which is what we would expect if it was written in Babylon or in the Persian period.
So you got that? The Assyrian period is in the 8th century BC. The Babylonian period began in the 7th and really was much in the 6th century BC. The Persian was in the 6th century BC. And so what he just said, you have to take note of that. It's really important. Okay, so let's keep going. Yes. That is very good to know.
What we find, for example, in, say, the Book of Kings, the later prophets, we do find lots of Persian words. We find, even some, characteristics of, say, how these words are used that even are indicative of the time frame. Like there's one particular word, Egyptian word, that we find that changes its form over time. And it changes its form at around 1200 BC. And the Bible preserves that old form, not the new one.
Good. Yep. See, sorry, atheists, you guys are losing this one again. So we're just bashing all your theories.
We find Egyptian names. Phineas, Panahesi, the Nubian. Her comes from the Egyptian word Horus, Hor.
That's interesting.
Even Moses comes from a derivation of an Egyptian Emshe name, like Amen Emshe, Mantu Emshe. They just take off the theophoric element, and you're left with Emshe, Moshe.
That's good. That's really good. So you get the idea here. And now another thing just to add to this that Dr. Falk did explain, and is also, you can find it in his book on the Ark of the Covenant in its Egyptian context, which is what this video was about. Listen to the full video. It's 90 minutes of really good stuff, very educational and informative. But what he went into great detail on was the Ark of the Covenant itself was built in exactly the way that they used to build Egyptian sorts of furniture back then. For example, he talks about the acacia wood and the prevalence of acacia during the time of the Egyptians in the Sinai. He further speaks of the way that there was the gold overlay and the way that that was very consistent with the way that the Egyptians did things. And so again, this is giving us some good evidence that the book of the Pentateuch, or the Torah, or the book of the law, was written by Moses during his time. At least the source materials are coming from Moses. We have a few additions in there, obviously, when they're talking about Moses being humble and Moses passing away, but we know that there's lots and lots of evidence, Egyptian loan words and the like, names of places, names of people, all consistent with its Egyptian context. I hope you enjoyed this. Please like, subscribe, do come again. And just remember, whether you eat, drink, or whatever you do, do it all for the glory of God. Thank you.